Hi everyone. Good morning, good morning. Hello on this very beautiful sunny morning. How is everyone doing? Pop me a message in the chat and let me know what's been going on this week. I've been really looking forward to this webinar. There's a lot of people joining today. So it's obviously something you're all thinking about quite a lot at the moment, which is really, really exciting. We're going to spend about 45 minutes just chatting about those 5 mistakes that we're seeing around that multi-generational gap and how it's playing out in your employee surveys. Just while I'm waiting for everyone to filter in, because I can see the numbers are still ticking up, ticking up. Just a couple of notes on kind of Zoom webinars if you haven't joined us before. There is a chat function, you'll find it at the bottom of your screen. Do just make sure there's a little blue dot drop down in the to box. If you're listening to this, do this now. Toggle that blue drop down to everyone. That just makes sure everyone can see the chat that comes in and it's not just sent to me. And that way, if you do have questions, ideas, or things you're seeing as I'm talking that you're currently doing in your organization, it's just a really nice way for everyone else to be able to maybe chime in and see if they can support or share that they've been seeing that too. My handy Mac reactions are doing what they always do when I'm talking with my hands. So yeah, like I say, feel free to introduce yourself into the chat, where you're from, what organization you're from. And, it's always really lovely to kind of see who's with us today and maybe what you're thinking about, what you want to get from this session. I will share my slides in just one second, but just before I start, I'm Lucy, CEO at Stribe, and we build employee survey software specifically for smaller HR teams. So that might be HR teams that are kind of small in terms of people or resource. And yeah, like I say, drop any questions into the Q&A box as we go, and I'll pick those up at the end. We've also had some submitted too. So just before we get started, I'm going to launch a little poll just to understand where you're all at in your survey journey at the moment. So that should be popping up for you now. Morning, Claire. So lovely to have you here. So I'll let everyone kind of answer that. And while you're doing that, I will share my slides. Okay. Apologies for that. Here we go. So I will just, I'm working on a slightly different setup today. Can anyone tell? Right. Anyone else got that nagging feeling that your fine engagement score isn't quite telling you the full story? Yeah, you aren't imagining it. If you've ever presented a really steady, solid score to your board and still had this feeling that it's not quite the whole picture, just keep that front of mind, because that's something we're going to be getting to the root of today. By the end of this, I want to show you exactly where that feeling is coming from, and what we can kind of do about it. 8% of companies include age in their D, E, and I strategy. That's a surprisingly low number, especially because the research on age diverse teams is so incredibly strong. We know, and we've seen it, age diverse teams show measurable gains in productivity, in knowledge sharing, in employee retention, and in overall company performance. So if the benefits are this well established, why is age one of the last things that those DE&I strategies are really thinking about? I know I'm preaching to the converted here. So many of you know this, but here's why it's so important. Your team at the moment could span up to 6 generations. People are working longer by choice or by necessity, which now means a single career can span up to 6 decades. And for the first time, your team could be spanning 6 generations, from the silent generation right through to Gen Alpha. Now, realistically, Gen Alpha are only just starting to appear in workforces at all. There's maybe a handful of interns and apprentices, not a huge share of the survey populations yet. So today we're going to focus on kind of 5 generations that make up the vast majority of the people answering your surveys. That's the silent generation, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. So 5 generations, 5 completely different sets of values, drivers, and expectations. Let's get into it. So let's talk about that gap that we're seeing first. Most survey strategies, particularly if you're using free tools, only really allow us to look at employees as a whole. We're averaging out those generations. There's usually one templated question set sent to everyone, regardless of their situation. There's data that's technically all there, but genuinely difficult to filter and segment. And when it comes to those survey summaries, there's no easy way to pick out the stories that we're seeing at that generational level. So it just gets pulled into one story for everyone. And this is the moment I hear about constantly. A survey score gets presented in the board deck. Someone asks, so what do we actually change? Or nothing changed from the last one, so what's the point in this one? Oftentimes it's because there isn't a segmented enough answer to really give them. It's too difficult to get to it. And that's where the change comes from, is understanding what's going on beneath those averages. So we've got 5 fixes. Each one are kind of rooted in a generation, but they're very much applicable to any of your survey software and kind of cycles at the moment. So fix number 1 is thinking about how we can give those smaller cohorts a way to be heard. This one's rooted in that silent generation, still around 1% of today's workforce, and they're more often found in kind of board, advisory, or voluntary roles. And here's what the research says. Subgroups this small routinely get suppressed or folded into averages in standard reporting. And that it's not a flaw, it's absolutely correct in the anonymity practices, protecting individuals from being identifiable in a smaller group. But here's what happens if this kind of skip gets fixed. That group's feedback has nowhere to go. If it's not that they didn't answer, it's that there isn't enough of them to report on safely. So their voice kind of disappears into an average with everyone else. And the fix isn't lowering that anonymity threshold. We shouldn't be moving that. It's just giving them a second route in, one that allows them to perhaps share additional feedback or capture that voice in a different way. So fix number 2 is having a think about each generation's score to its own baseline, not the average for everyone. This one comes from what we see pop up in the baby boomer generation, Gallup's most disengaged generation in today's workforce. Baby boomers are the generation most likely to trust leadership in the first place. 54% of them rank as the group with the most confidence in corporate leadership. And that fact has been cut off on my slides, which is useful for you. I'll fix that before they get sent out. This means that those same scores from different generations may actually indicate different things. So when you're looking at a trust score from your boomers versus Gen X, they might look the same, but they're going to be very different. And if you aren't able to identify the deviations from group averages, the same disengaged or engaged score gets read the same way no matter which generation it's come from. So a dip from your highest trust generation is a much bigger warning sign than perhaps the same dip from a group that's naturally more skeptical. So it takes more to move a high trust group's numbers, and when it does move, it means it's worth paying attention to. So your system should be able to help you dig into those numbers and keep an eye on those changes. Fix number 3 is all around proving anonymity and not just claiming it. So this one shows up a lot in Gen X, a generation shaped by watching their parents' generation get caught up in redundancies and big corporate changes after years of loyalty. So here's what the research says. And this is the strongest stat in the whole session. Gen X are 21% less likely to trust their organisation to do the right thing. And they're 30% less likely to trust senior leadership than other generations. So we're not thinking about anonymity and the perception of anonymity with our surveys. you'll get a short guarded answer from this group. So, sorry, so if we're not thinking about anonymity and the perception of anonymity with our surveys, you're going to get a really kind of short guarded answer um, that you may put down to kind of no strong opinion, right? We've all seen it in our surveys before. We'll get a 5 or 6 from a group and think, oh, well, that's okay. They're about right. Um, that no strong opinion is actually much more likely to mean I don't trust this system enough to give you the real answer. So I'm giving you one straight down the line. Telling people a survey is anonymous doesn't automatically make it trusted, especially for a generation that will doubt exactly that kind of reassurance. So it's about thinking about finding a separate survey system or creating that culture around that survey where it is truly trusted. And that does take a little bit of time. And there are a few things that we have in a guide I will share with you after to help with that. So number 4, and this is one of my favorites, possibly because I am a millennial, so I might be a little bit biased here. But if you, this is all about asking people if they believe in the place in this organization and this team of leaders, not just if they're satisfied with it, but if there's a true belief in what you can achieve in your decision making and in your goals. So this is around the questions that you're adding into your survey and the questions you're asking your colleagues. Do they believe in this place? Not just are they satisfied with their job? Are they satisfied with working here? And this one's really driven by the millennials in your organization and what they value most. The generation most likely to leave a role over lack of purpose. 45% of millennials and Gen Z have already left a role over unmet purpose. So if you're not asking these questions, you might not be surfacing that alignment in your organization. And that gap between what someone was kind of promised, what they're looking for in their role, and what they're actually living can hide in a perfectly fine satisfaction score right up until they hand in their notice. So they might be satisfied with everything, but is it truly meeting that purpose that they need? Satisfaction and alignment are two very different questions. Most surveys only ever ask about satisfaction. So it's about understanding how you can start bringing some of those alignment questions in to really meet that gap when it comes to your millennials. And our final fix, number 5, don't take Gen Z's fine at face value. This one's really rooted in, like I say, Gen Z, the most vocal generation online and the fastest to disengage in employee surveys. I've really put some tricky words in here for myself this today. So what we're generally seeing is that Gen Z shows the sharpest generational decline in institutional trust on record. So here's what happens if you aren't thinking about this in your surveys at the moment. A fine from your least trusting generation will look exactly like a half decent score in your reports. It's very, very similar to what we were just talking about. But it's often disengagement wearing a slightly more neutral answer. And unless you can pick out their scores in your reports, you may not notice it. And to be really clear on this one, this isn't a claim about any kind of tool kind of automatically detecting disengagement or something. It's just a habit worth building about being able to check in on those groups and identify what those groups are saying and looking at their scores individually. So it's a little bit tailored to your own organization because like a flat fine from this group, it just deserves a little bit more digging into, and being able to surface that will allow you to do that. And when I mean digging into it, things like looking at the themes coming out from their free text comments and understanding what the sentiment is there, using perhaps your survey tool if it provides a summary for you to understand what that generation in particular is talking about in terms of themes and niggles and what's really driving them and their scores. So we've gone through kind of 5 different ways you can improve your survey when it comes to thinking about that multi-generational piece. But here's the thing that ties everything together. Every single one of these things comes down to 3 things. Access. Can this group even be heard? Trust. Do they trust the system enough to answer honestly? And the right question. Are you actually asking and reading the right thing in your surveys, particularly when you're thinking about what drives these generations and what these generations value. So, access, trust, and the right questions. If you remember nothing else from today, just take away those three things for your next survey. So, what does good actually look like in practice? There are three kind of quick checks that we can do. Um, in fact, I think there's four on this slide, so I've lied to you. I've given you an extra one. So, one, can you filter your results by generations in a few clicks? Not an export to Excel and then doing it manually and building out things, just a few clicks. That's good. Can you send tailored questions for specific groups instead of forcing everyone through one identical question set? Does your tool write summaries for you that actually surfaces those generational themes, or does it just hand you an overall average? And one more thing worth asking is your survey software kept separate enough from your other internal systems so that trust in anonymity stays really high? So are you running it currently inside a Google Forms or a Microsoft Forms? Or is it a separate kind of purpose-built system? Have a think about where your current setup sits against each of those. That will be a good place to start. So feel free to kind of screenshot this slide if you want to take it away. We'll also pop it out for you after. Stribe is the beating heart of our business. I wanted to bring some of what we've been talking about to life through a real example. This is Power. Power actually moved to Stribe from CultureAmp. Since making that switch, they've seen some really measurable improvements. Their ENPS has improved from 22 to 71 in under 2 years. They've maintained an average survey response rate of 86.5%. And they've gone on to win a number of awards, including the Best Financial Wellbeing at the Good Employment Charter Awards in 2025. But my favourite example from them and from working with them is this. The word dentist kept coming up repeatedly in their surveys. It was in one of the word cloud reports that we produced for them. That single, very specific surface theme wasn't found through a kind of average score or a low score or a high score. It was found because it kept coming up in some of the analysis that Stribe did for them. That led directly to a new healthcare cash plan, which is now one of their most loved benefits. And this isn't a story about generational segmentation specifically, but it's proof of the exact underlying mechanisms we've been talking about in this session I just went through with you. If we're specific, if we have a tool that allows us to really action those themes that are surfacing, and not, it's not quietly averaging away the scores, it's really giving you specifics that you can work on. And if you've got tools where your employees feel confident and comfortable to share their true feedback, it's very easy to take those snippets, take those tips, take those tidbits, and put them into something that really creates meaningful change across all of those generations. So let's bring those 5 fixes together into one place so you can start to see how they build out. So we're talking about kind of small cohorts getting lost in averages. That's where having multiple routes for your employee voice can really benefit your organization. Thinking about having one measure for every generation, that's solved by being able to filter and segment results by generations directly in just a couple of clicks. And having anonymity claimed, but you can't quite prove it, is a really tricky place to really start getting that trust and buy-in in a system. So finding a system that has a public, independently verifiable, all my words are going today, public, independently verifiable anonymity policy. So somewhere your employees can go and do their own research on your employee software and start to understand how that specific software is supporting and managing employee anonymity. So things about, thinking about your satisfaction and asking, always about satisfaction and maybe not by alignment. You need to be able to create and send tailored questions when it's relevant. So maybe not every organization, maybe not every generation, sorry, will benefit from those tailored questions. So it's just thinking about how you pick out those pockets of generations to send some tailored surveys to. And then Gen Z's fine at face value. Make sure your software can summarize and surface those themes using the segments that are really important to you. So, if any of this has got you thinking, there is genuinely a low pressure next step. We would love to be your fresh pair of eyes on your survey, and you can book a free kind of 30-minute survey audit with us. There's a little QR code there, and we'll also include the link in the follow-up email later. So if you want to see how your own last survey actually looked, segmented by generation, or you just want to sense check your question sets with us, there's 30 minutes there for you to use. We've helped hundreds of organisations across the UK, including people like Newcastle United Foundation, the UK Space Agency, and London and Chester Zoo do exactly this process. So do, use our brains, and we'd be more than happy to help. And there's absolutely no pitches or sellings. Don't tell my board that. We're just generally trying to share the love and get your surveys really working for you. So I have got one more poll to run, but I have also got about kind of 10-15 minutes for any questions. So I can't see anything open in the Q&A right now, but feel free to share something now. It might not be about this particular challenge. It might be about surveys in general. We've got about 10 minutes. So, what's coming up for you? Are there any challenges you're seeing in your own surveys at the moment? Any advice or tips you want me to share? Feel free to pop it in the chat or the Q&A. I have got a couple of questions that got popped through earlier. So I can get started on those while you guys are having a think. So one of the things that we get asked quite a lot is, these kind of root causes, access, trust, or the right question. Which one is usually the easiest to fix first with what you've already got? And I would definitely say the right question. We actually have on Stribe, we have a question checker that you can access for free on our website, and it will just give you a little bit of feedback on your questions. So when you're starting to think about, that satisfaction versus alignment question, do dig out some from our question banks on our blog and then check them against that just to see how they feel for you. And you can take those right away into your Google Forms or your Microsoft Forms and see how those kind of play out for your organization. When you're thinking about trust, that's one that really is a longer term piece of work. So if you are using a Microsoft Forms or Google Forms, it's going to be a little bit more of an uphill battle because generally employees view those as within your system already. So the kind of best thing to do if you can't move to an external system like Stribe is to start having a think about how you can send those little signals to employees every single day that shows that they can trust the system. So, training up managers to be confident when they're sharing employee feedback and comfortable when they're sharing employee feedback is really key. Managers have a really difficult job because they're kind of in the middle of it when you're thinking about that employee feedback cycle. So the more confident and comfortable we have our managers when they're supporting that feedback process and that post-survey communication, the less likely it is that there will be any kind of negative consequences from that communication. If the scores are a little lower, they will feel really happy and confident in the data and the insights that it's given them, and it will be a really productive conversation. And that access piece, again, if you are struggling with access and how different organizations, different employee groups, sorry, are accessing your surveys, it's having a think about kind of where they're working, how their days look, and how the surveys can fit into that. So we recently worked with an organization where about 90% of their staff aren't at computers every day and also don't have email addresses. So very difficult to reach in, I guess, the modern world. So we did a lot of work around access via QR codes, understanding where the employees moved around the warehouses and factories through the day, where they spent time, and where we were most likely to be able to capture maybe a couple of minutes of their time to grab them for that survey. So things like toilet loos, the break rooms, lunch rooms, locker rooms, anywhere where they would maybe have a device, and then accessing that survey through a QR code really worked for them. So there's lots of different tweaks you can do. And like I say, all of these things add up to a larger change. It's not just one fix that's going to support everything. I'm still not seeing any questions come in. So I feel like maybe we have answered everything for everyone. I will just move on to close up and give you guys a little bit of time back in your day then. So before you go, if there was one thing from today that really landed for you, do share it on LinkedIn and tag Stribe. It's the best way to keep this conversation is to continue kind of talking about it. And obviously, if any of this resonated and you do want to talk it through, that health check is there for you too. I will just pop it up here. And then finally, thank you again so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it and absolutely loved having you here. We will follow up with all of the links that I've mentioned and the resources I've mentioned and the recording after this. Like I say, thank you so much again for joining us today. Have an amazing Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar very, very soon.